Hey everyone, welcome to episode 13 of Seeking Witchcraft. It is me, Ashley, and I have been lucky enough to have both Arlie and Sassafras join me for this episode as well. So say hi, guys.
Hello.
Hi, guys.
Wow. All right. Well, given the timing of this episode, it is practically Samhain. So happy Halloween. Yay. We're going to talk about some topics regarding really the witchy aesthetic and the witchy lifestyle. And maybe talk a little bit about Samhain too. But given the fact that you can literally buy a triple moon pentacle at Hot Topic or Spencer's or possibly even Walmart, we're going to talk about some things like that. So, first thing first, I think what we're going to start with is what it's like with life in the broom closet. So I'll talk about myself. I am in the broom closet, which is kind of, I don't know, might be coming as a surprise considering I have a whole ass podcast, and I am initiated into a coven, but I am somewhat in the broom closet. I do have coworkers who know. I do have friends who know, but I don't tell my family. And the reason for that is I did mention I did grow up very Catholic, and I had family members who went to Catholic schools and Catholic universities and things of that nature. And as much as I would like to tell them about my witchy life per se, I've kind of filed it under the things they don't really need to know. Like, my family doesn't need to know who I'd be making out with on the weekends, like they don't need to know who I'm worshiping alone at home. I kind of just put it together. Like, they don't really need to know what I'm doing. This is my personal spiritual journey. It's about my spiritual growth. I found what makes me happy, and I don't need to share that with them, I suppose. I will say though, sometimes it does suck because, when I was having my initiation coming up, I really did want to tell, my family what was going on in my life, because they would call and be like, oh, how are you? Like, what's going on? What's new? And I'd be like, oh, nothing. It's fine. I'm totally fine. Meanwhile, I have like an initiation pending. But yeah, so I'm partially out with the people around me, but I'm not out with my family, and I don't plan to come out to them, but I kind of don't really mind it. It'd be nice, but yeah.
Yeah, I'm pretty much like, I'm out. Like, all my friends know.
Say who you are.
Yeah. Oh, by the way, this is Arlie. Hello. But yeah. So yeah, I've been out for a long time. I think I wore my first pentacle when I was like 12, I think. However, there's
the pentacle versus the pentagram.
Oh my, thank you for asking, Ashley. A pentagram is the star. A pentacle is the star in a circle. And I absolutely will judge you if you get it wrong. I'm kidding. No, I and I understand it, people use it interchangeably, and they're like, it's just a word, it's just a star in a circle. And I'm like, well, if you do certain types of rituals and ceremonial magic, it's incredibly important that one is encircled and one is not. Anyway, but yeah, so I began wearing a pentacle, I believe at 12. I actually got it at Atlantic Bookstore.
Real edgy.
Yeah, I was, but there's definitely aspects of my life, where I would prefer not to say it on my own. Like work. For instance, I don't work for a Christian company per se. It's not legally a Christian company, but it's based off of a family business, and they are incredibly Christian, which I have nothing against Christians. They used to do, prayer circles in the morning, but I used to have a friend that worked with me, actually my best friend who used to work with me. You know who you are. And it kind of got out that he and I were witches, and thankfully it was told to, or talked about with, someone at work that I was pretty close with, and she's not very judgmental, but there were definitely a few people after hearing that, that treated me a little bit different because of it. So I'm like, I don't really think that religion in most workplaces, regardless of your religion, it shouldn't even be a topic in the workplace. And also what year was it? 2016 and a little bit of 2017, where I was living at the time, we had neighbors that were relatively close to our house. Long story short, I had a Samhain ritual, on our property with one of the local groups that we have in our area, and not a coven, not a tradition, just locals meeting up. And we did an ohm in the beginning of the ritual, and the neighbors heard this, and they were absolutely convinced that we were doing some shady satanic stuff. And literally the rumor going around my town that I was in, my hometown, was that my roommate and I were devil worshippers. I think it began as we were called the witches of insert city name here. And then it evolved into the Sisterhood of Satan. And I'm not making this up. That did not come from us. Yeah, it was a Sisterhood of Satan. And I'm
Upgrade.
Okay, well, I got a freaking promotion apparently.
That sounds like a good Lifetime movie.
Oh my God. She from there, she looked at every opportunity because she was very Christian. She was very judgy, and she was just a terrible person, to be honest. And she literally would just find any excuse to just give us shit. She called the cops on us once because we were hanging out outside. I mean, it was crazy. So that definitely woke me up a little bit to people who do choose to remain in the broom closet for these reasons. People have lost jobs, they've gotten divorced, they've had their kids taken away. Even nowadays, the local group that I run on Facebook, it's not just private, it is secret, because not everyone is out. So yeah, that's kind of me, even though I have, witchy tattoos and I wear witchy necklaces. Yeah, there's definitely appropriate times to be in the broom closet. So
yeah. And I know you lucked out with having a pagan roommate.
yes.
Yes. Yeah. So that is something that people, can struggle with too. I mean, I'm sure you can be denied an apartment or renting because of your practices. So yeah, that's definitely a thing. So then it asks the question too, if you're looking for a roommate, do you seek out one who's pagan? Do you tell people that you practice this? Is it even really their business to know? Well, yeah. What's your life like?
Well, I this is Sassafras, and I do not outwardly show any aspect of my religious experience at all. I have a bunch of tattoos. They are placed in areas where, for the most part, you're not going to notice them at all. The other day at work, someone noticed I have a tattoo that goes up my back, and it comes up to my neck. And if I'm not wearing the right collared shirt, you can see an aspect of it. But luckily, they're private enough, and they recognize that I'm a private sort of person. They're like, "Is that a tattoo?" And I'm like, "Oh, so you've seen it?" And they say, And they just leave it at that. They don't ask me any details about it. They don't ask me what it means, nothing like that. I got my flu shot at my job, and the pharmacist that was there looked at it, and it's got a Theban script on it, which is it's an alphabet which hides what it is. It's just a cipher. It's English written with a different alphabet. And he asked me what it was, and I'm like, "Oh, well, it's written in a cipher." And he's like, "Huh?" He's like, "Well, what language is it?" And I'm like, "Well, it's English." But he didn't ask me what it... Well, he said, "So what does it mean?" And I'm like, "Well, it's written in this way to obscure what it means." And I just left it at that.
I'd have to kill you if you knew.
It's he's like, "I'll have to look that up." And it's like, "Well, hey, good on you. Do your research." But I don't really display it. While I may be wearing a pentacle, I don't have it outside my clothes necessarily. There have been times where I wish I had, because I'll see someone else wearing one, and I'll want them to not necessarily feel alone. In our area, it's so easy to feel completely isolated if you have even sympathies in this direction. And it's one of those things where it's like, what, like flashing a badge? I mean, that's not the way it should be, but kinda. I mean, to a point, it's like, well...
You in the club.
Yeah, it's... And you kind of open the conversation with, well... I see you have that pendant. What does that mean to you?
I think I'll just be like, "Hey, nice necklace," and just leave it at that. Kind of like a nod, like, "Hey, I see you."
Right. I like your shirt.
Yeah.
But
I've done that too. Yeah, I'll see people out and I'll be like, nice shirt. And then if they don't say anything, I'll be like, "So does it mean anything?" And they'll be like, "Yeah." And I'll be like, "Yeah, I know. I'm in the club too. It's fine."
Well, and that kind of goes into, this has become more and more common just to see out and about and around.
The witchy aesthetic.
And there are a lot of folks have a lot of different opinions on that. I think in a lot of ways this has made it easier to be in the closet, because you don't have to be 1,000%. You don't have to kiss. No, I don't want to say that. Say kiss the cross. That's it. I mean, it depends. Whenever a religious minority is in a society where they're not the religious majority, there's always some sort of blending in that a person may have to choose to do, and it may suit you to it. You are not less of a witch. You are not less of a pagan. You are not less of a heathen if you do not wear it on your arm on an armband. You don't have to do that.
This doesn't necessarily go just with like religion. This also involves just regular witchcraft as well.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Because a person is going to see, even if it's just some small thing that you're doing, it's like, it's a luck spell because I've been unlucky lately. If there's some aspect that shows there, a person's going to make all kinds of assumptions about you. And that's one of the problems. It's one of the problems in this society. But anyway, so when people are out and about and they have, you'll see people just walking around on Halloween. Everyone's got a witchy hat on. It doesn't matter,
Everyone's a witch on Halloween.
Like at your work, it's like, everybody's got a witch hat on at work. And it's like, well, how about that? This wouldn't have happened 20 years ago, that's for sure.
No. And this might be me personally. I think I am more excited when I see older people. It doesn't even have to be older people. When I see a practicing witch, whether or not I know it before I see them, or witch star, that's a whole thing. But for instance, a really good example, a lot of Gardnerians that I've met, they have no aesthetic. None. And I'm like, oh my goodness. And I remember when we were, it was either with you or someone else in the coven, when we were interviewing them, I started feeling some kind of way. I was very naive in thinking that, every witch had a witchy aesthetic, and I have a witchy aesthetic. Yeah. And I mean, my opinions on that aside, which we might get to, when we have someone in our coven who, with her aesthetic, I would never think that she was into witch stuff, and it's great, and I love that. Because to me, and I'm not saying you're less genuine of a witch if you're not broadcasting it all the time, but it speaks in a certain way to me personally. So when we were interviewing her, I'm like, wow. And it made me think about my image. And I remember, this is for someone else in the coven. I remember for one of our first outer court meetings, I was like, guys, I'm just gonna let you know right now, not every high priestess and not every witch has drawn on eyebrows and, this like post-goth aesthetic, not everyone is like me. And, you guys were cool and you're like, oh, it's cool, we like that anyway. And I'm like, okay, because there's a lot of witches that just are plain Jane, t-shirt and jeans and, no makeup and whatever, and they're very low key. And I love that because like, oh my God, that person is witchy as hell.
When we went to witch camp, I remember there was this one woman there who was dressed so modestly. Yes. Like it was as if she was like, I don't know, like Mormon or something. Like Amish or something. Yeah. And I remember I was like, oh, interesting. Okay. Like I just wasn't expecting that.
Yeah. And the witchy aesthetic, and this is kind of referencing the whole, hashtag, witches of Instagram and whatnot. And I don't have anything against, per se, like, the witchy aesthetic, because, like, I realized one day that I was a walking contradiction, because I had this whole rant one day about the witchy aesthetic, and I'm like, wait a minute. I'm like, son of a bitch. I'm like, I have a dress that has pentacles all over it, and I'm like, I'm a walking contradiction. But that being said, the one thing that may grinds my witch gears is like, if I see someone, who, because as Sassafras had mentioned, where we're from, there's not a big pagan community, which I'm working on, but I'll see someone that have like pentacles, or they'll have the tattoos, or they'll have some kind of witchy or occult reference adorned on them somehow. And I get really excited. I'm like, oh my God, there's another witch or another magician or another occultist in my community. Let's talk. Let's have tea. Let's do magic. Blah, 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 blah. And it's just, they've never done anything like that. They don't care about doing spells or doing magic or looking into any occult thing. They just like the image. And I'm like, well, okay, that's cool and all. You do you, boo. But at the same time, you look as if you're broadcasting that you're a witch or you're an occultist of sorts, or you're spiritual in some kind of way. And that makes us really excited because there's not a lot of us where we're from. So...
Okay, so I just want to let you guys know that Arlie and I have differing opinions on this. We do. We definitely do. We do. I love the witchy aesthetic, and I am so happy and so excited that it is so publicly out there, because people are wearing things. I mean, I have absolutely run into people who are wearing... I remember I was with Allison, who was on one of the previous podcasts, and her and I walked into like some organic grocery store, and our cashier had these gigantic pentacle earrings, and they were gorgeous. And I actually didn't notice them. Allison noticed them, and she was like, Ashley, look, like whispering. And I was like, oh my gosh. So we finished our transaction. I was like, oh, I love your earrings. Do you practice? Because I kind of assumed, wearing those earrings, like she was going to practice. And she was like, oh no, I don't, like, I've never really gotten into it, but like, I really just like the way the earrings look. And I was like, oh, okay, that's no problem. Yeah. To Arlie's point, she might say, well, this kind of goes with her thing with like, well, they're wearing it and like, they don't actually really know what they're wearing essentially. And they're not really into this, but I think it's great because one, I can, buy a freaking triple moon necklace at Hot Topic if I need to. If I don't feel like waiting for Amazon Prime to, deliver me one. Or Walmart or Spencer's or Spirit Halloween or any of the above or Kroger. I don't know, just anything.
You just know all the places.
Well, I saw people posting about Witchy Halloween pillows at Kroger, which we don't have out here, and I want one. Anyway, I love it because it's opening people up to the witchy world. And even if they're not exactly practicing, there's some part of them that's being drawn to the symbol. I mean, you don't just wake up one day and be like, I think a pentacle is my favorite shape, Like, there's a reason why you like that. And even if in the moment you're not completely like practicing or you haven't even cracked open a book or even really Googled what's witchcraft, what's Wicca, you're still open to it. So when you do meet those people who are involved in the craft, they're not going to burn you. Like, they're going to be fine meeting you, and they might actually be interested. They might be wearing those things because they want somebody to come up and talk to them a little bit more about it. So I think it's great. I love that I can buy my shit anywhere pretty much nowadays. And I'll give you guys a perfect example too. So it is October, it's, Halloween season, and I saw these really cool banners at Spirit Halloween that you can buy right now that say "Witch is welcome," and they have a triple moon pentacle on them. And I was like, oh my gosh, I really, really want these, but like, do I really want to put this outside of my house? Because it's very freaking blatant. But then I was like, it's Halloween, so I can put this out. And I put them out, and it's funny because my neighbor actually saw me doing. He was like, "Oh, are you having a Halloween party?" And I was like, "Oh yeah, actually I am." But I actually am having a Halloween party, so it kind of worked out. But then even then, I still felt kind of self-conscious about it because I felt like I had to get a bunch of other Halloween decorations, so it wasn't so obvious that I was out as a witch. But then I have to consider, like, to me, those symbols have a meaning to me. Like, they actually, I know what they mean. I know what they represent. But to other people, such as the cashier I had wearing the pentacle earrings, she didn't care about wearing them because there was really no meaning to her. So I don't know. Sometimes I get nervous with wearing craft jewelry out in a public setting, but then I realize a lot of people don't even know what these symbols really mean. And I'll give you one other example before I pass you to Sassafras, because I'm sure he wants to say something on this topic as well. So my family, as I mentioned, they don't know about that I'm involved in this. And I have Ouija board stuff all over my house, like pillows and decor. And my mom came to visit and I had it everywhere. And I immediately was like, oh, Mom, do you like my Halloween pillows? And I said it very quickly. And she was like, yeah, I guess. And I realized my mother doesn't even know what a Ouija board is. She doesn't even know what a pentacle is. She has no idea what any of these symbols are. So I could probably go out wearing a full ass outfit and she wouldn't even think twice about it. So I love the witchy aesthetic. I think it's great. Arlie and I have totally different opinions on it, but I'm totally for it.
Maybe it's just me. Perhaps I have not seen enough marketing of this sort of thing to men. It's possible that this is a slightly different experience. What I've noticed about guys that do
we can talk about that. How
where
witches are men.
Oh yes, I'm a witch. I'm not anything but.
You're not a warlock.
I'm not a warlock.
You're a wizard, Harry.
I'm not a wizard, Harry.
Damn it.
But guys, so people will wear sigils. People will wear.
What's a sigil?
Okay, so the Goetia. So there are Okay, so if you see a very
We don't have to talk about sigils.
It's within this. Okay, it's within this aesthetic. It's a very interesting looking symbol that is not a necessarily
focused energy into a unique symbol,
and they're all different.
Purpose. Yeah,
it's a really wild ass symbol. But
I can explain a sigil really, really quick.
There she is.
So listen, sigils are pretty much like I would Google it. I'm going to talk about it on a future episode, so I'm not going to get super into it. But pretty much sigils are symbols that mean something, and they represent something, and they have some sort of power with them. And when I first learned about sigils, I was like, I don't really believe that, blah, blah, blah. And then the person giving the workshop was like, well, have you ever looked at a brand logo and thought about something? And then he showed the freaking Mickey Mouse ears, and he was like, this is a sigil. And I was like, shit. They do work. They do have powers. Brands are sigils. Anyway, I'm sorry.
So
Someone's mind just went.
My mind went.
how do you see from that? So
Witchy aesthetic.
to get back to right, so you'll see elements from grimoires that they will often have a catalog of. There's a particular catalog in the grimoires of spirits, and all of them have these sigils. And you'll see someone wearing a medallion of that, someone with a tattoo of one of these things. And I really wonder if they know what that is, if they know that by having that, they are, in essence, sharing some aspect of themselves with this particular spirit. And, like, you know, my occult senses, my supernatural senses are tingling, and I'm just kind of like, on one hand, I don't want to, you know, barge in their privacy and say you don't know what the hell's on your arm, but on the other hand, I'm kind of a little bit concerned, because it's like, do you know what this is? Are you sure that you want that in your life? It depends. I mean, a lot of people have a lot of complicated views on this stuff. So, but anyway, that's something that I never expected I would bump into, you know, on my various journeys throughout my day, seeing someone with one of those, and then all of a sudden I'm thinking about, oh God, do they know what that spirit is? It's
We're gonna find out.
a little complicated, perhaps.
So I did want to touch upon this. So I did an interview recently with another podcast, which I will post an episode talking a little bit more about that once they have their information out. And one of the interviewers was a man, and we did talk briefly about men and witchcraft. Because it's, you know, when people think of witches, they instantly think of women. They don't necessarily think of men. But there are absolutely men in witchcraft.
Yep.
What do you think about the term witch for a man, or versus wizard or warlock, or?
Well, I mean, so many people would like dive into the etymology of, you know, where this word comes from, and the Wicca, and they'll say, oh no, it's Saxon, oh no, it's Anglo, it's a different dialect. No, I don't. A person can play with words and with names and with, you know, various aspects of that as much as they want to. The linguistic side isn't so interesting to me. For me, in my particular tradition, the term is witch. For me, that's really as complicated as it needs to get. I wouldn't want to be seen as something I'm not, and luckily within my tradition, this is what I am, so I get to wear that. If the term for it was warlock, if it was something like that, because I'm in this, that's the it kind of goes back to the titles thing, of, you know, what do you wear outwardly, what do you have? It's not like it's in front of your name, Witch MD. No.
Have you come across a lot of male witches?
I think that it varies. I have some experience with different traditions. I have some experience with, you know, neo-pagans, with people who follow a more Reconstructionist perspective, and some heathens and things like that. I would say this particular aspect appeals to everybody. I would say that it's not necessarily a 50-50, but I think that in a lot of ways, certain types of people are more public about it. Like if you posted a meetup or something like that, would you get more women than men? I mean, it varies, but it's all up to an individual's self-confidence in putting themselves out there. Meeting with other people that are interested in this stuff is not easy. Talking about it with other people is not easy.
You would think, because of the popular witchy aesthetic, but no.
Well, especially if you're a guy, because all the witchy aesthetic, like if you want to buy anything at the store, that like a t-shirt that talks about witches, it's going to be in the women's section. Yeah. It's not going to be in the men's section. It's going to be necklaces aimed for women. So,
well, luckily, if you listen to certain types of music, you can still kind of tap into some of the symbols there. Well, a
lot of like really, really heavy, like there's a lot of like pagan bands that are like super hardcore heavy metal type with like names I can't even pronounce.
Well, that's folk metal. I'm not going to get into a folk metal discussion right now because, oh my God, they're playing today. Anyway, I'm sorry. I got distracted.
I mean, it's kind of one of those things like where to a point, it kind of gets mixed in. Well, like the show on Netflix, Sabrina the Teenage Witch. For them, they go with a witchcraft as Satanism angle, or rather a specific type, perhaps. They kind of go with that. And so, I mean, that kind of shows that in the popular culture, those connections get made. And indeed, historically, you can see where it's literally branded that way by all of these books from the 1500s. But I feel like I'm getting way the hell off topic here. As a guy, I don't know. I mean, I listen to death metal anyway, so like having shirts with like that stuff on it. I mean, if I was gonna wear one of those shirts, I don't know. I got nothing.
Thinking about it, because I didn't actually stop to consider that. I understand that, and I could recognize that it's more females that are drawn to witchcraft, as it were. But I'm thinking about it, and I personally find myself hanging out with more guys than women, for no specific reason. I just get along better with them.
Sorry.
But I've also yeah. Oh my God. Yeah, we have like
I'll just yeet myself out of the room.
a coven full of women. Here I am. But no, women are great. But I've noticed that a lot of my male friends who identify with some occult path or identity or practice, I've noticed that there are out of the male friends that I have who are doing some witchy thing, I would say 50-50. Half of those are more, they're either like Wiccan, or the other half would be I have a lot of magician male friends.
Ceremonial.
Yes. A lot of chaos magicians and a lot of chaos practitioners.
Tradition I didn't mention, actually.
Yeah, well, chaos magic is
chaotic.
But yeah, I've noticed a lot of, and maybe they feel, I can't really explain why. I can't speak for them, but I have noticed that with me personally. A lot of the male occultists or spiritual folk, as it were, it's right down the middle. It's either Wicca or it is this obscure occult ceremonial chaos thing. So.
It's not so obscure.
Yeah, sure.
it's the Solomonic community. These things are gaining more prominence, more recognition.
Yeah.
But if you're if you're in the know, you've been paying attention to these things for a while. The first things that I got into were grimoires and Solomonic grimoires, and
what are
and
grimoires?
just. A grimoire is I think the word just means grammar. It's a collection. It's a book. It's an occult book, and often it's old. But that's kind of the term as it gains a level of antiquity to it. But it's a book of spells, and they often will have. It's interesting, and the history of it is fascinating. Kind of outside of the realm of this topic, but old. If you think about the old books. Where it's not just in the world of fantasy, in the world of fiction, these books did exist. People did do this stuff.
Where can you find one?
Well, frankly, I mean, you can just go on Google, and there's a number of different.
Amazon.
Joseph Peterson has had this stuff up for decades and decades. That's where I first got my information before I knew who he was. There are books on Amazon where you can literally find a book written upon the topic of the Solomonic grimoires, and a bunch of really fascinating characters and people compose those things. And I'm so glad that actually that's getting more mainstream play, because these are not necessarily. It's neat to see the genre of book expand past where historically it has, where it's not just the super specialty booksellers, book publication houses that are doing one or two, and they cost $1 billion. Special edition of this book written in 1517 or what have you. But it's neat that it's not just a niche anymore in any direction.
So getting kind of back to what we had originally talked about, we kind of skipped over this part, but actually, let's see. Yeah, we kind of skipped over this part. Using craft names kind of ties into the anonymity of being a witch. So I have a craft name, but I'm not going to tell you guys what it is, because that's part of being a witch. What do you guys think about craft names? Does everybody need a craft name?
A craft name is useful, and if you say, does everyone need one? The answer is no. No. You don't. If you are going to tie yourself to a name in that sort, and actually the selection of a craft name is a very personal one, But you would never want to say your mundane name right next to your craft name because that kind of gets rid of the anonymity aspect. You've given someone the key to your particular puzzle. You'll notice that Arlie and I have not outwardly said our first names or what have you.
You mean Sassafras isn't your real name?
Well, I mean, it is. Mom was a hippie, and...
So I guess, oh god, I could go on about craft names. So yeah, we're for time's sake. So in the aspect of the anonymity for craft names in relevance to people who are still in the broom closet or utilize aspects of being in the broom closet for parts of their lives. So if you, for instance, I am not going to use my quote unquote mundane name in this podcast, because in this podcast I'm here because it is a witchy podcast and it is all about that topic, and Arlie is the aspect of my life that pertains to this. My mundane name, it goes back into also magical identity. There's a previous episode where I went into how you can kind of trigger yourself to go into a magical or witchy mindset by certain things, incense practices, etc., etc. So when I need to, shed my mundane skin of working 40 plus hours a week, driving to coven meetings, and all this, the life stuff, and I had to go from that person and become Arlie for my coven, having that name, there's a lot of power in names. So becoming Arlie is me saying, okay, world, screw off for a second. I had to do witch stuff, so I'm Arlie right now. And also, if you don't want, if you want to go into a community that is not face-to-face, like podcasts or forums, and you can use a craft name, and whether, how serious you take it, depending on why you have the name, you can retain the anonymity. You won't know that Jane Doe from your town is, Sapphire Moonshadow. Yeah.
Techatrix.
Yeah.
So I started off this podcast using my regular name, Ashley, my mundane name, I guess you can say. So I actually have, it's interesting. There's different ways you can look at it. So Arlie spoke on her view of why she's usually using her craft name in this podcast. For myself, when I started this podcast, it was started as an educational podcast about, witchy topics. So while I do have a craft name, I don't necessarily like using it as much outside of circle. I mean, I absolutely do say it outside of circle, but I only really say it to my coven, my people, my friends who know, my coworkers who know that I'm involved in this. They don't even know I have a craft name. And if you're listening to this, haha, surprise. But I won't tell it to them. I'll only tell it to other fellow witches, given the context. So it's not a hard and fast rule. It's really dependent on what you do. You don't have to have a craft name. Some witches, though, are very, very, very adamant about never using their craft name outside of a drawn circle. Yes. Or even talking about some witchy topics outside of a circle.
They'll have a public craft name, and then they'll have a craft name for in circle. I mean, it's all the power that you want to assign to it.
And some people have craft names depending on where they're at their training. So some people might start out with a craft name when they're, a solitary, and then they join a training group or a coven and they have another name. And by the time they go through all the things, if they progress through all the things, they might have a completely different name. Or the other thing too with craft names, they don't have to be something crazy. You don't have to be, what was the fake name you just gave? Like,
it was actually my old name.
Oh my God.
Awesome.
Fake name. Sorry.
It was like when I was a wee little solitary eclectic Wiccan. My craft name was Sapphire Moonshadow, y'all.
Okay, well, you don't have to have a name like that. You can have a plain ass name like Bob.
Like if you have the craft name Bob,
I mean, you're gonna be a hell of a witch with the craft name. Yeah, like honestly, like if you were like, yeah, my craft name is Bob, because at first you kind of want to laugh, and then you're like, oh, I don't really want to mess with them. Like that's like it's such a crazy, like, basic name. And if somebody named Bob is listening to this, like, my name's Ashley, it's pretty basic too, so it's fine. It's a very 90s name. Yeah, it doesn't have to be, Luna Blue of the Stars. Like, it could just be something basic. It doesn't have to be crazy. And you don't have to come with your craft name right away. Believe me, it took a long time for mine. And even mine, I was still kind of iffy with it. And I have like another name in mind, but that's a whole nother topic. Anyway, we are very much over time. Is there any parting words that you guys would like to say?
God. No, Nemo said a lot.
Yeah. Seek your truth.
Yeah. All right. Well, you heard it from them.
One could say seek witchcraft.
You didn't. Oh God. I can't believe she just said that, guys. With that, I am signing off forever.
I'm gonna head out.
Ashley out.
All right, I'm gonna head out. All right, thank you guys for listening. I will talk to you next time, and happy Halloween.